summer of 2013 was a profound one. It was the summer that Ellie Joseph and Jay Bailey participated in the two-row renewal campaign on the Hudson River, a 16-day trip from Albany to Manhattan, New York. A flotilla of canoes and kayaks, allies in one row, indigenous in the other, became a living two-row wampum, so to speak, paddling close enough to be of support, but not so close as to interfere with each other. This experience provided much personal growth, and there are lasting friendships that continue to this day between the allies and the Haudenosaunee of that historic movement. How could we not bring this concept to Grand River territory? With a dynamic group of volunteers and a credit card, the two-row on the Grand completed its voyage in 2016. It too became a vehicle of healing and a unique way to provide cultural teachings. That closing ceremony in Port Maitland, where the Grand empties into Lake Erie, where paddlers bared their vulnerable selves and celebrated their accomplishments, was, again, history in the making. How could we not offer this healing journey again and again? Now, throughout the summer of 2020, in spite of a pandemic, we were able to complete journey number 5. We both hope that this legacy continues. It is much needed.
On the morning of the first day's paddle, we would meet at the launch point with morning snacks and a registration team to welcome everyone. On the subsequent mornings, we would leave our tents to have an early breakfast prepared by our ground support crew. After breakfast, we brought tents and baggage to the U-Haul, where they were neatly arranged by our ground support team as we prepared to paddle. We started each day's paddle, gathering our vessels, safety kits, water, and snacks ready to launch at the specified hour. Before starting out, a cultural elder would share the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address, or the words before all else. After our minds had been focused on Thanksgiving for all that we would see and not see on the paddle, Ellie would remind the paddlers about safety whistle signals, sunscreen, and hydration. I would then talk about the logistics for the day's paddle, issues of sun, river, wind, and weather. All together, we helped each other position the vessels for launch in succession. Once everyone was safely on the water, and our sweep, the safety paddler ensuring no one was left behind, gave us the signal, we would call, "Paddles up!" When we saw that everyone had their paddle up to signal their readiness, we would start. As we paddled, where possible, we would form up in 2 rows, Ellie leading the indigenous row and I leading the ally row, enacting the two-row wampum, paddling close enough to help each other at need, but not so close as to interfere with the way the other steered their vessel. Approaching gravel shoals or rapids, we would analyze the channels available and one of us would take the lead with the advice to follow at a safe distance, unless we got stuck. The river itself is a teacher. The current often is not flowing directly downriver, and in some places it will carry your vessel in its direction, not yours. Sometimes a trail of bubbles or reeds trailing on the surface show you where the current goes. Sometimes there's little or no indication until you are in it. You learn to be alert and go with the flow to reach your focal point, particularly in faster water. In calm water, negative tension and worry can slip easily into the water off your paddle and swirl away from you. Our safety paddlers, spaced out along the length of the group, would let us know by walkie-talkie if we were too far ahead of the stragglers. Periodically, we would stop anyway, for a rest, a water break, or a salty snack. But sometimes we paused earlier than planned, so that we weren't too far apart. At lunchtime, we met the ground crew and our caterer at a designated spot where we had a reasonable takeout, washroom facilities, and room for everyone to eat comfortably. In some places, Ellie had arranged for mobile washroom facilities. Likewise, at the end of the day, we would meet the ground crew at a reserved camping spot.
It'll clear a lot of space. Thanks.
Tent placement was followed by cultural teachings, and then supper, catered once more by a family from Six Nations. After supper, there would be social time, sometimes another teaching, or a campfire. On the last day, we arrived in Port Maitland in time for a late lunch, followed by a sharing circle and or a cultural closing. This year, we had a pandemic to contend with in what was supposed to be our 5th year anniversary. To commemorate this occasion, we had planned to rent a bus to provide Six Nations of the Grand community, family members, and ally supporters transportation to our final paddling day, where the wampums that we carry, the two-row wampum and the Friendship Belt, had by now reached the mouth of the Grand at Lake Erie. We had plans to provide commemorative t-shirts to participants and plans to provide lunch to our spectators, complete with a Haudenosaunee social dance. Instead, provincial guidelines created to curb the spread of the COVID-19 virus meant that large groups could not gather, campgrounds were closed, and for a portion of the paddling season, the Six Nations Reserve had manned safety checkpoints around its borders to lessen the flow of outside traffic to the community in an attempt to slow the spread of the virus. Because of these barriers and obstacles, our two-row in the Grand could not be held with its regular 9-day paddling and camping event. To keep with tradition, the two main organizers made the decision to once again paddle the wampums from Cambridge to Port Maitland. An itinerary was put together, put on social media, with an invitation that any interested self-sufficient participants would be welcome to join us. There would be no camping, no sharing of meals, and sadly, no cultural teachings in person. On June 21st, 2020, the day of summer solstice and National Indigenous Peoples Day, our first launch was held at Cambridge, Ontario, with 12 paddlers in accompaniment. A community member opened with the Thanksgiving address, Tobacco Down, and prayers up to Creator. Where physical distancing was difficult, masks were mandatory. Our summer continued with these day paddles, and our wampums made their way down the Grand, launching at Paris, Brantford, Onondaga, Caledonia, Cayuga, and Dunnville. Our numbers of participants grew, with a high of 34 paddlers who joined in for the final destination of Port Maitland, and for a final time, Tobacco Down, prayers up to Creator. What we thought would be a journey of 2 turned into a total of 54 participants, some old friends from our first 4 years, and even some new recruits who look forward to two-row on the Grand 2021. What was missing? Of course, the catered meals and sitting shoulder to shoulder at meal times or assisting each other with tent setup and takedown. But what was most missed were the cultural teachings, which we simply could not host since the group could not gather in close proximity. Many thanks to the Six Nations Economic Development Trust Fund, who provided financial support to several community elders so we could create cultural teachings on video instead. They will be uploaded to our YouTube channel in a playlist called Tread Talks, and private links will be posted in our Facebook group to the videos periodically through the colder weather to bolster the spirits of those in attendance and those who could not attend. For those who couldn't be there, we also are posting trip clips from each day's paddle. We have paddlers come from as far away as Orillia, Ontario, Zurich, Switzerland, Dubai, and New Zealand. Allies come to learn about past and present experiences of being Indigenous, to experience the culture, to learn from the river, to be present with Indigenous people, and to share the journey as brothers and sisters together in one paddle family. Comments from allies on the Two-Row and the Grand include, "This has been a real eye-opener for me. I never realized how deeply the trauma goes. I've been wanting to show my support for Indigenous peoples, but never knew how. The teamwork has been a real release for me. I really appreciate the spirituality of the teachings. This is medicine for my spirit. This has been life-changing. For me, the opportunity to make a positive difference in the lives of Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, to bring the two closer together, has been the most beneficial effect of the Two-Row and the Grand. As a Christian whose national church ran residential schools for the government, each stroke along this river, side by side with Indigenous friends, is both an act of defiance of past and present wrongs and an act of worship. I feel more deeply connected with both the creation and Creator through this experience, in which I gladly offer my time and all my capacities for this very fruitful reward."
A river is a body of water with flow, with movement. The Two-Row and the Grand experience is also a flow. It too has movement. In its 5 years of existence, participants, both from our community and our ally participants, have recognized a deep spiritual movement that comes from within. As we dip our paddles into the water, any negative energies can be let go, washed away with the current, to replaced by a refreshing, positive vibe of goodwill and right relationships. Right relationships with ourselves, right relationships with each other. To be on the water is a time to heal, surrounded by its beauty, sparkling ripples, birdsong, huge willows that offer welcoming shade. A whole new vista presents itself as one paddles this meandering waterway. How can one not experience a sense of calm within? There are arduous portions of the Two-Row and the Grand journey. Cumbersome portages on a sticky hot day, wind in the face on a 27-kilometer stretch. Rain. It's when we come together as one, as stated in the words of the Thanksgiving address. We come together to help each other through those difficult times, lending a hand to carry or towing a fatigued paddler. It's then when we see each other as supports. That's how the healthy connections begin. Our Grand River is good medicine.